All right, so we are getting into a short-term review of the Razer Deathadder V3. For me, I have the Faker edition. I bought this upon retail, well, not retail, upon release. So it costed roughly $180, and the normal black and white were $170. Right now, the new retail pricing has been changed. The Faker edition is now $170, and the normal black and white is now $150. The differences between the two, or technically three, there's really none other than the design. Obviously, this is red, has Faker's signature, and not too sure what this is. I'm not much of a League of Legends player, so I'm not too sure if that's just his design or if it's in reference to a character he plays. I ended up picking up the Faker edition because I just really like the look of it. Now, with that said, even though the Razer Deathadder V3 is 4K compatible, it does not come with a 4K dongle. You have to buy that separate, and I bought it up there. You could tell kind of it's out of frame a little. However, for me personally, I had to buy it off of Razer's website, and it costed roughly $32. Now, obviously, $32 is quite a bit, especially for just that part. It doesn't even come with an extra cable or anything like that. It's literally just the little adapter there. So even though this is 4K compatible, I recommend not buying the 4K hyperpolling little dongle thing unless if you really want 4K. It's nice that there is that upgrade path, but $32 is just quite a bit in my opinion, so I don't really recommend it. Plus, there are slight issues with 4K even on Razer mice that I've noticed, or at least with this one, and I'll get into that later on. Now, for ownership of the mouse, I've had this mouse for roughly 5 months, just over 5 months now. However, actual usage, I've only used it for roughly slightly over 2 months now, mainly in August, June, and July. Beforehand, I've been kind of like jumping between mice of the Lamzu Atlantis Mini, this G-Wolf's HSK, and the Razer Deathadder, just kind of jumping in between, as well as the Pulsar X2 over there. But as I said, it's been my main mouse for the past few months, just actively using it. And with that said, this is also my first ergo mouse in such a long time. I had the SteelSeries Rival 600, I believe it's a 600. It is their weighted ergo mouse. That was back in 2017, 2018 when I used that. So it's been a long time. And after using the Rival 600, I bought a Razer bundle from Walmart, and it had the Razer Deathadder Essential, which was their old shape. And I used it for like 3 days before buying a different mouse, which was the Glorious Model O Mini, or minus, pretty sure. So I can't really make a comparison of the Deathadder V3 with its new shape in comparison to the old shape, despite the fact that I did use it, but it was only for 3 days, again, back in like 2018. So can't make a comparison there, but I will say the shape of this is actually really great. Even with me with small hands, it fills out my hand pretty well and has been pretty good to me so far, considering I've only used ambi mice in pretty much ever. The Pulsar, Lamzu, Logitech, G Pro Superlight, the Pulsefire Haste, just to name a few. I've been using ambi mice for so long, and switching over to this ergo mouse has been really great to me, except for one little portion of the mouse. Could just be because of my hands. My hands are pretty small, and also I'm a little bit more on the chunky side, as you can tell by my hand, but it's more so right here is the problem, if you could tell there. And right here on the left side of the mouse, it doesn't quite like sit in there comfortably. It not necessarily like stabs my hand, I guess more so just kind of pokes or sits a little bit more uncomfortable there. Again, could just be the fat in my hands, or maybe slightly because of the shape, but not too much of a problem there. Just slight discomfort, but not enough for me to just outright not recommend the mouse. Overall though, pretty well made, pretty solid, except for here. I'm trying to do my best to do these like little transitions here, but here on the right side, for whatever reason, like the entire mouse is pretty solid, but for me with my model right here where my thumb is, there is some creaking for whatever reason. Like I can push on it, it makes noise, I can feel it go in a bit. Could just be because there's no support there maybe, or a clip underneath where it would be in order to like hold it and support it. But a little sound test here if possible. I might have to raise the volume a little bit on that, and in which case I'm very sorry about the fan in the background. It's very hot right now in my room, but hopefully you were able to hear that slightly. Nowhere else on the mouse does it make that noise or creaks except for that part there, and it's not really an issue. Is just more so a concerning issue for later down the future to see how well that holds up, to see if it breaks or cracks or anything like that. Considering how many Razer mice I've had, I haven't had any actual issues with them breaking or deteriorating in any way where it affects the mouse like that, but we will see later in the future. Hopefully nothing bad happens. Now moving to the other side of the mouse here with the side buttons. The side buttons have always been one of my favorites on Razer. However, with this mouse, this is more so a preference, but considering how big the mouse is, I wish the side buttons were slightly bigger as well. Not necessarily just in the size, because these are fairly big, but more so just it protruding out more, or it having a larger bulge, if that makes sense. But these are pretty flat, and they are also pretty flat and flush with the mouse as well, as you can tell there. I just wish they were slightly rounded or protruded out of the mouse a little bit more. Size wise, again, like I said, these are pretty nice. It's just I wish they protruded out of the mouse a little more, but aside from that, like I said, they click very nice. Some of my favorite side buttons, some of my favorite clicks just in general of any mouse. I know some people don't like optical switches from Razer. Some people love them, some people don't. I'm a fan, and with that said, I should probably know as well, I'm not too sure if these do have optical switches, because they don't feel as light as the Razer Viper Ultimate I had. But if these are optical switches as well that they've been using, not too sure what they've done, but I'm a fan of it because they don't feel super light. Because one issue I've always had with the Razer Viper Ultimate is where I'm resting my fingers and I accidentally like right click just from the weight of my hand and fingers, because I kind of just not necessarily like forcibly push down onto the buttons, but I do accidentally press them quite a bit. And I've had this issue with other mice as well that have very light actuations, so not too sure what they've done, but it's not as super light but not super heavy either. Now going on in between the clicks here with the scroll wheel, I am both a fan and a hater of this scroll wheel. I personally really love tall scroll wheels, which is what I love here. A very tall scroll wheel, very nice, feels nice as per usual for Razer in my opinion. One thing I don't like though is how loose feeling the scroll wheel is. It's a preference thing, but for me, I like more chunky scroll wheels where I need to put a little bit more force into them. The Pulsar is one of my more favorite scroll wheels. Same with the HSK here. It requires a little bit more pressure to move the scroll wheel versus this. It feels a bit more loose. Obviously it's preference. Some people like it for scrolling through very quickly and for those who do jumping with the scroll wheel. Despite me also using scroll wheel for jumping, I'm just not a fan of it. I just don't really like loose feeling scroll wheels because I tend to accidentally push onto it at times, or I will accidentally over scroll, or maybe at times under scroll, if that makes sense. So this is more so a design issue than a actual issue with the mouse. Something Razer has been doing, making the ports a little bit deep into the mouse. The Viper Ultimate I really did not like. I know the Viper Ultimate has a charging dock, but if you wanted to access the USB cable or plug it in, it was very narrow and you couldn't really use any other cable except Razer's. Luckily this is not the case. They did make the opening a bit more wider, but the port is still pretty deep. Even though I am able to use my own cable for the Deathadder, I still find it a little bit restrictive that it's so far deep into the mouse versus just towards the front end, because if the cable does have too big of a shroud, then it could be incompatible and just not fit. So I do wish that it was a bit further out. So since we're still on the topic here of the charging port here, another issue that is a very simple fix, I feel as though it could be a simple fix, just a software or firmware update. But when charging the mouse, obviously there is no actual on off switch. It's a button, but as of right now the mouse is turned off, but if I were to plug in the mouse it would be turned on, which makes sense. That's how it is with any wireless mouse. You can still use it while charging. The problem though is when you unplug the mouse, when it's in a off state, then you plug it in, then it turns on. But when you unplug it, it will not go back to its original off state. So if you are someone like me who charges their mice overnight, unplug the mouse, go to work, whatever, the mouse will stay on. Why? I don't know. It's very inconvenient because obviously you want to come back home and start playing, and this thing will already be down to like 80% battery life. Obviously there is also a sleep feature built in order to conserve battery life, which is nice, but it's just very dumb that the mouse will stay on instead of going back into its off state. Like I said though, very simple fix that they could probably do. Maybe have it in the software and make it a on off switch, where if you do like that feature, then you could just have it turned on. But if you don't want that feature, so you could actually conserve battery life, then you could just have it turned off so it will go back to its off state after a certain amount of seconds or minutes. Now moving on to the thing I was talking about, which was a plus if that does happen where you do leave it on, the sleep mode. I'm not sure why Razer has it like this, but you cannot turn off the sleep mode. I assume it's on their part trying to be a little bit more green and trying to conserve battery life for people, regardless of whether you want or not, so you don't throw out mice like it's nothing because the battery goes bad. But I do kind of wish you were able to turn off the sleep mode. You could only change the timer at the sleep mode goes off or turns on, which is between 1 minute and 15 minutes, but you cannot outright turn it off. It will go into sleep mode no matter what until you turn off the mouse, which in my opinion I think is a little dumb. But a nice little plus though is if it does go into sleep mode, it will turn back on almost instantly, which is very nice. Some mice I have, like the HSK here, there's a bit of a delay when it goes into sleep mode and then you're shaking it to wake it back up. So another thing I want to note, as I stated in the beginning with 4K, even though it's not a necessary part of the mouse, I do want to note that I have had experience with stuttering on the Deathadder with its 4K. Some people who do have 4K compatible mice sometimes will just go to 2K or just leave it at 1K. But for those that do want to have 4K, just know that it does have some issues still. It does stutter slightly. I've had the issue on CSGO more so than anything else. Also, a nice little note that they did leave on the software is if you do enable 4K, more CPU bound games such as CSGO may have frame drops. So if you don't have a strong CPU, you might encounter more issues. Now moving on to the good parts of the mouse, which I've already stated quite a few. The shape is very nice aside from that little part, but that's on me more so than anything, more than likely. Clicks, very nice and crispy. Obviously I talked about the height of the scroll wheel being really nice in my opinion, but one thing I will give even more credit to for the scroll wheel is the little scroll band. I am a very big fan of Razer's scroll band. It's slightly textured. It doesn't have like a weird design or anything like that. It's just kind of like diamonds, so it makes it very, in a way, sticky to your finger, so it like catches onto your finger more than anything else. A nice texture there. Some other mice have very cheap feeling scroll bands, or the design on it is just not great. Razer's, in my opinion, is very good. Another thing is really good is the battery life. Razer claims that at a constant motion, meaning it never goes to sleep, you never turn off the battery, it's constantly moving like this. At 1K polling, it lasts 90 hours, which is very nice. Obviously with sleep mode it can last even longer. It lasts at 24 hours at 4K polling with constant motion. As I said, obviously battery size is a lot different between this HSK and the Deathadder, but this thing does not last that long in 4K. So it's just very cool to see. It does last 24 hours at 4K. Who needs 4K at 24 hours? I'm not too sure. And going over to the skates here, I've said this with the Razer Orochi, I believe. Ever since the Razer Orochi and forward, their skates have been very, very nice. The Viper Ultimate, I made a comment saying that the skates felt very, very scratchy and took a pretty long time for them to break in, and I recommend to replace those skates. The Razer Orochi and now the Deathadder, in my opinion, are actually very great skates. They glide pretty well. I'm pretty sure like 99% of people will be happy with them stock. So now we are here at the end. Do I think the mouse is worth it? Especially here in 2023 with more mice coming out and a little bit more ergo mice coming into the market at $170 now for the Faker edition. Even so, $20 more than a normal one, still very worth it in my opinion. And at 150, still pretty competitive, especially with the tech that Razer has and the build quality, aside from the side squeaking here. Hopefully nothing happens for that. But aside from that, like just overall really great feeling mouse. And then if they do more firmware and software updates, maybe 4K can be a little bit more stable in other games. But there is also that little upgrade path, granted $32 for a dongle. A bit much, but it does have that upgrade path if you do want to go 4K. But overall, definitely a great mouse, especially for an ergo mouse. Highly recommend. But anyways, hopefully you guys found this video somewhat informative and helps you in your next mouse purchase. But anyways, see you guys later.